Hey guys, thanks for jumping on. We're going to get started here in just a couple of minutes. We're waiting for people to come on. We've got about another minute or so before we need to start. So we're just waiting for people to come on. Let us know that you're here.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is Jim Howard with Trinity Security Allies. I hope we're going to take a few minutes to let some people catch on. And we're doing this as a webinar on our Zoom. And we're also doing this Facebook Live. I have the pleasure of interviewing and talking to attorney James Simmons, who is a personal injury warrior and accomplished champion for his clients serving North Carolina and North and Central Florida. You might like to go to North Carolina. I don't know. He is the owner and founder of the Simmons Law Group, which specializes in nursing homes, abuse and neglect, employment law, and negligent security claims. His passion for helping others in need is that he himself faced similar difficulties in pursuing justice after a traumatic injury before he became an attorney. In 2008, James was involved in a catastrophic motorcycle accident, suffering traumatic injuries. His body was broken, the motorcycle he drove was total, and his hospital care led to hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical expenses. It was at this point where he realized that people were vulnerable and the laws in Florida do not always protect the injured. This adversary became a wake-up call for James and forced him to refocus his career to aid others and fight for them during their difficult times. James has been there and he can help you. James' legal career has been centered around helping those in the need and strategically worked to learn how insurance companies, corporations, and even governmental agencies get away with providing unfair results to those seeking justice. He first started out his legal career practicing administrative law at the Florida Department of Financial Services in their agency licensing department so that he could learn the inner workings of the insurance industry. He later spent the next 6 years working for two of the largest Fortune 500 civil defense law firms in the nation. He spent this time defending insurance companies, medical facilities, nursing homes, corporations, and physicians facing medical malpractice claims. He obtained this experience so that he could understand all aspects of the defense side, so that when he represented those seeking justice, he would know all the strengths and weaknesses of his opponent. Today, James is the owner of the Simmons Law Group. He has tailored his law practice from his early life and career experiences to provide the optimal results for his clients. James has been trained, obtained the experience, and is always prepared to take on your Goliath. Above all else, James is here to serve you. So without further ado, I'm going to get into this discussion with James. How you doing there, brother?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Hey, I just, I kind of wanted to tell everybody how really we got to know each other, because I think this is also important also. Because both of us are brothers in Christ. I mean, we're very open about our beliefs. And when I first heard about you, was through a mutual friend of ours, Greg Heckeroth. And of course, Greg's on our board also, but Greg was talking to me about a young, experienced, go-getter attorney that wanted to get out here and help churches. At that time, Wendy and I were working with another attorney firm, kind of doing the same thing. So when you and I first met, I kind of told you that this might be a conflict of interest. So I wanted to be really careful here. But it's just the way God works, because soon after you and I met, the agreement between us and the other attorney firm just didn't work out the way we wanted it to. So we just parted our ways. So, it's just amazing to me how God does these things and he sets these things up for us. And here we are today. I mean, reaching out to churches like we have. I know that you came over and talked to a church that we work with and gave them some really excellent information. And so tonight, I just kind of wanted to pick your brain, because there's a lot of stuff going on right now. Mm-hmm. We've we right before Christmas, right before the new year, we had the Freeway Church of Christ shooting. And it was one of these things that, to me, in my professional experience, reviewing the shooting, it was a armed robbery gone bad. And that was the thing that we really looked at. The thing that concerned me was that right after that, it seemed like it just like a mushroom overnight. There was all these different companies that wanted to teach you church safety training. And when I would go and look at their web pages, the front of their web page would be some guy dressed up in tactical gear, or guys surrounding him in tactical gear as he is a squad leader or getting ready to lead them to battle. And when I would look at their page, I would see things like, executive protection details or industry security, but you would never find, except way down in the bottom, a little bit of a sliver of something about church safety. So when I see things like that, to me, it's almost like it's an afterthought. Hey, if we can get in and tell these people how to do this, then we'll do fine. Well, then as I dove a little deeper into it, I was like amazed at some of the training they were teaching, like clearing rooms and firearms training. I mean, getting these guys out and really teaching them like they're, SEAL Team 6 or something like that. And so that really concerned me a little bit. And that's when I reached out to you, because I felt like I wanted to get your opinion on something like this, because we'll get into the whole thing in a little bit, but the first thing I wanted to do is get you to talk a little bit about the importance of some sort of safety plan in a church from an attorney's perspective. So I'll let you go ahead and take off from there.
Perfect. Well, first and foremost, thank you for that warm introduction and kind of just, laying out my experience a little bit. And I think hopefully that kind of gives folks some context for what I'm saying here, because I'm saying it from both sides. One, from a insurance defense side, for the guy who wants to defend a premises, or in this situation, a church or a place of worship, versus a guy who is representing someone who is bringing a claim, which I do that too. And so kind of like what we talked about, or one of the little taglines we have when we do these speaking engagements are, you can either listen to what I have to say now and invest the work up front. So pay these small costs now to protect your church, or you may be paying me later. Because what ends up happening, and first and foremost, folks need to understand that regardless if you're serving the public, meaning you have individuals that come onto your premises and they're expected to be there. You're expecting patrons, churchgoers, visitors, whoever. You're automatically going to have a duty of care, a duty to, basically warn them or provide certain measures to protect them, or not protect them, but warn them of a danger that is reasonably foreseeable, something that could happen, right? That brings upon a couple things when you talk about church premises liability. You have to assess not only whether your grounds are safe, meaning that you don't have potholes or broken steps or things that people can fall on, things like that for those types of negligence claims, but you also have to have measures in place to mitigate if a criminal act occurs on your property. And so say your church is located around, which a lot of churches are, it's located in an area that may have a number of vagrants or criminal things going around that area, drug dealing, robberies, those kinds of things, which if you think about it, in the 5-mile radius of any premises, you may find that. And so in legal terms, as an attorney that's pursuing a claim, I can spin that and say, well, because all this stuff is happening around your church, you're on notice, or you should know that something could happen on your premises. So now you have a duty to have adequate security. And so, going to your question, should you have a plan in place? Yes. You should have some protocol, some procedures, someone come in and train some folks so that you know what adequate security would be for this type of premises. And it's got to be something that can be replicated, something that is easily transferable to other members and things of that nature. But that is necessary because most businesses, most churches, most other entities do not have that plan in place. And so when something wrong or something goes wrong at that premises, they have nothing to defend themselves. They have no proof to show to their attorneys or their insurance company that we tried to do something to stop this. So that's why, that's important, because that's your first defense. Did you take some active measures before this happened?
Well, okay. So did you take some active measures to do this? Just before we came on, you and I were talking about, Wendy was bringing to our attention, and just so that everybody knows, if you have a question, please go to the Q&A and ask your question there, because Wendy, my beautiful wife and assistant, is online also. Say hello, Wendy.
I think
she's out there.
My phone.
Yeah.
Hold on, I'm here. Hello.
Okay. If you have a question, because I see Dana has raised a hand, so we want to make sure that we get all your questions. If you go to chat is really not where we're capturing our Q&As. So go to the Q&A so that we can make sure that we get everybody. Okay. When we talk about the training, and this is where it concerns me, churches are not, the church safety team is not a police force. It will never, unless you hire police officers, which is a completely different environment that we're talking about. But if you do it internally, they are not a police department. So when, we were talking before we got started of some church that was talking about, if you don't get sprayed by the pepper spray, you can't use it in the church. When I hear things like that, I almost lose my mind, because it falls into that thing of where we're talking about these people are looking at uses of force escalated, where it goes from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum, which is a liability here in Florida that you have to study when you want to be a law enforcement officer. That's one of the things that you have to pass. So when I hear things like that, I just want, like I said, get your opinion on what do you think these people are thinking about? Companies that their main focus is in a tactical application like clearing rooms, or their courses are a tactical application of pistol or rifle for church protectors. What are we doing here? Isn't this something that we really need to be warning these churches out here to be a little bit careful on what you're setting up?
Yes. And this is kind of what we were talking about before we got on. There is a very fine line that you have to maintain, so the law gives you a minimum standard. Mm-hmm. And the best course, obviously, when you are representing a premises, a business owner, a landowner, a church, here churches and places of worship, you want to know what that minimum standard is, because when you start doing things that heighten that standard, and you give yourself a heightened standard, then you have to live up to it. And it can be a double-edged sword in a sense that can harm you. So let's look at the minimum standard, okay? The minimal standard, right, is that if you are on notice of a foreseeable risk, right? There's a
domestic violence.
So yes. So for example, just to break this down, so I'm not using a bunch of legal jargon. All right, your church is located in a at-risk area. Okay, there's a lot of places of worship. That's why they want them there. They want to be able to reach out to that community so that they can help. Well, it's also a double-edged sword, because at that point, you know, there may be vagrants, there may be drug dealing that's going on, prostitution, you know, robberies, all those kinds of things. And so the law says, well, you're pretty much on notice, you're constructively on notice that things are going on. So that means that some of those things that are going around in your neighborhood or around you can happen on your premises as well, or inside your premises. And so what you have to do, and the law just says you have to act reasonably by providing adequate security or some sort of warning mechanisms, okay, so that you can warn those that are coming on the property. That's as I would say as general as you can look at it, right? So what do attorneys have to show? What do attorneys have to prove that a business owner or a landowner or whoever, you know, took reasonable steps and had adequate security, right? Well, like I said, some places don't have anything that they can show, any training manuals, anything they can prove. So it's hard for them to show that they did any kind of, you know, there was any adequate security. So what I always say is, look, first and foremost, you should always have someone come in and do a security assessment. You know, for churches, you do want them to assess your safety team, kind of make sure that they're having, you know, adequate training. You have somebody supervising and seeing what they're actually doing or what they know, who's involved. I know with your company, Jim, you guys are almost doing a behavioral analysis to a certain degree by having some guys go through the simulator so that you could see how they would react and things of that nature. And so at that point, you have a third party come in, have done an assessment, someone who is going to provide the owner of the premises a manual or a guideline, a set of instructions. Hey, here's what you do X, Y, and Z if something occurs, and you protect yourself, right? Now, the risk that you have to be very cautious about is when you start talking about folks who are saying, well, we're going to train you with tactical gear or, you know, some of the things we were talking about, like SWAT, you know, protocols and things of that nature. And well, here's the thing, if the minimal standard says just do something reasonable, and then you start implementing things to where, you know, folks have a specific reaction time, or folks have specific, you know, protective weapons or what have you, and you know, that's what you created a higher standard. And then it's easier for folks like me to say, well, look, when something happened, these folks that, you know, weren't adequately trained anyway in this type of tactical, you know, seminar, which, you know, obviously it looks great. It's great to have on paper. But when something actually happens and your folks or your safety team can't meet step one of that training, it's not going to make it's going to make the claim worse for you. Because you elected a duty that you couldn't meet in the first place.
Right. Right. And see, that's the important part. They talk about, I'll give you an example of kind of something that you talked about. You're saying here, the minimal standards. And then when you place yourself at that higher standard, what happens when you do not perform at that higher standard? And when we look at the El Paso shooting at the Walmart, one of the things that has come out is that there were people in there that were armed. There were people inside there that were armed with a handgun of some sort. But because they did not have the proper training, they didn't know what to do. So the best thing that they could do was protect their family or get people out, do it some way like that. They did do things like that. So when we talk about coming into the churches, the thing that you want to do is protect your flock. Now, I'm going to continuously use the West Freeway Church of Christ shooting, because from a training point of view, as soon as that guy came into the church with a fake beard and a fake wig on, law enforcement should have been on the way. For them not to have law enforcement coming, for somebody not to go up and talk to the guy to begin with. These are the things that we churches are good at, talking to people. you know, and with a little bit of training, you can kind of start to see the body language and the behavioral patterns and the different things like that, to where you can make a call to where you could contact local law enforcement instead of letting it get out of hand like it did there at that church. You know,
Can I chime in for just a second?
sure, dear.
So Matt Hoskins has a questions. We have several questions that are popping up, and I'd like to kind of address them while we're still on that topic.
Okay.
So does having tests and requirements to allow carrying weapons lead to higher liability since the church assumes that they are qualified to make that decision? That's from Matt Hoskins.
And so I will tell you, anytime you are going to arm someone or represent that this is something that is okay, or you know, something that the church is condoning, you're creating a duty. Okay. And so that's why I say it's always very, very, very important that when you are assessing your place of worship and trying to determine what is the best way to provide security that not only makes the flock feel comfortable and makes them feel that this is a safe place to congregate and worship, but you also have to have something that's going to be effective, because you never know, at some point they may be needed. And so typically liability arises when when something goes wrong, when you thought that you had everything in order, right? And so I will tell you, in most negligent security cases, this is what the area of law that I specialize in. Negligent security is basically where somebody makes a claim saying that had there been adequate security or adequate security measures present, the person that hurt me or injured me would have either been deterred or would not have been able to commit that act. Okay, and so basically, what I'm saying is the main hurdle that most of these churches have to cross is, once you determine, okay, we need to have a safety team, and we do want someone or some individuals from that safety team armed, so that if we have an active shooter situation, there's someone qualified or trained to at least minimize the risk of injury and death, or attempt to do that, then those specific individuals need to be vetted and trained by a third party security consultant, or some sort of security training company. Because I'll tell you, if you don't have the documentation to show that that person had been vetted, had been trained, had the qualifications to carry a firearm, and at least some background in it, being able to use it, you are creating a higher standard, because just by walking around with a gun on your person, people in the church are going to assume that you're qualified or that you're able to handle that weapon. It's an automatic assumption. And so that duty has been created just by visual. It doesn't even have to be, anything outside of that. So you got to be darn sure that the person that you pick and the folks that you pick to carry firearms in church, that they've been qualified, fully trained and qualified. Because when claims arise, the question then is going to turn, well, was this person, acting within the scope of their training or what the church allowed them to do, or were they acting outside of it, which gives the church an out?
Well, let me ask you a question here, James, because I first off, let me say this right here. I agree with everything that you said so far. One of the things I kind of want to throw into what you're talking about also about the training is, your church needs to have some sort of policies and procedures in place, what you do in case these situations arise. Not everybody is supposed to be pulling their guns and shooting. Going to go back to this again, Texas again. When you take a look at it, 7 people showed up with guns. Now, how many more people had guns in there? What were the other responsibilities people should have had? Were they looking at the children's ministry and making sure the children's ministry was okay? Could this have been one of these things where somebody else was outside? Now you have everybody that has the guns inside the church and not paying attention to if he had a getaway driver or something like that. The other thing I kind of wanted to throw in here, and I wanted to jump in because we use a company, we recommend a company, USCCA, as far as legal assistance in case of a person is involved in a shooting. And one of the questions that I had was that, somebody had contacted us and said, hey, will they cover us if we are volunteering at a church? And so I contacted them and I asked them because I thought that was a good question. And they said, as long as a person is protecting somebody's life. So if here's where my issue is, and here's where I have problems. Wendy was just telling us about somebody shot themselves, accidental discharge. That's what scares me more than anything else. What scares me more than anything else is that somebody would challenge somebody. And this is where we're talking about. You should be doing crisis negotiation or, bringing it down, not elevating it. And if you have people that do that, and the next thing you know, let's talk about the Pinellas County guy that was arguing with the lady because she parked in a handicapped parking spot. He elevated that. He brought it upon himself as far as I was concerned. So he's serving 10 to 20 years right now in the penitentiary. Good for him. He should have. But we need to be making sure that that is the last thing in the world that person is thinking about doing when talking to somebody. It is completely different when a guy jumps up out of your church thing and pulls a gun. Shoot, there could be 100 people in your church, especially in the state of Florida with, 1.5 million concealed, weapons permits out here, that could pull a weapon and start shooting at the guy. You hope that your safety team would be able to, like you always like to say, minimum litigation issues here, because they kind of took over the situation immediately from their training, even if the firearms training is a part of that, but they took it over and made it a whole lot less than it would have been if they didn't have any training at all. So, I kind of wanted to ask you, does the stand your ground here in Florida that we have offer any additional protection to somebody who may be a volunteer for a church? The church really doesn't, kind of does one of these don't ask, don't tell, as far as because they tell the church that they can carry, but and I don't like saying it like this because I don't want people to take this the wrong way. I'm a firearms instructor. Nobody inside my safety team carries unless I go out and I shoot with them. I have the date and time that I went and shot with them and my notes, so I know what they can do. So, if they can't shoot, I'm not going to let them carry a weapon inside the church. That's the thing. I have a guy that tells me he can't hit the broadside of a barn. I tell him not to carry then. Mm-hmm. So, does the stand your ground protect you in any way in this? You have a shooter. We're not talking about you get into an argument with a guy like the situation that happened in Tampa, where the guy got into an argument with a guy over his driving, pushed him to the ground, pulled a gun out and shot and killed him. He's going away. I can tell you that right now. And plus the mosque that it happened at is going to be paying big bucks for that because there was not the proper training. So go ahead, please.
Well, I'll tell you this. So in Florida, you have a number of protections, or what I would say are defenses. Okay. So, whenever you pull your firearm and you kill someone, you terminate their life. Obviously, the first thing that even the investigators, the prosecutors, and those folks look at is, was that killing justifiable? And
right.
Sometimes no charges are made because of just the plain facts that it was justifiable. Well, what is justifiable? Well,
right.
Self-defense is the very bare bones reason for being able to have a justifiable homicide is you were defending yourself or defending someone else, defense of others. Okay. Now we in Florida have an extra defense, which is stand your ground. So, you know, most states have the castle doctrine, or, you know, that would be the only place where you wouldn't have to run is within your home. We have that as well, but we have stand your ground, where it doesn't matter where you are. You don't have a duty to retreat. Okay.
Right.
Now, what the big, you know, a lot of argument and debate with stand your ground has less to do with whether the person had a duty to retreat, more so than they focus is whether the force that the person used was reasonable. Okay.
That to me is very important, because people don't understand that. That to me is very important.
And so that's what, if I can impress upon anybody today when they're evaluating how to implement their safety team and what they should arm them with and all those kinds of things, you have to realize that in Florida, for the force to be reasonable, it needs to be at least the type of force that you've been presented with.
Yes.
So if someone is coming at you and you can clearly see that they have no weapon on them, fisticuffs, pulling a gun and shooting them is not always justifiable.
Right.
Now, we can bring up facts of, okay, this guy was 7 foot. He was 260 pounds. He was ripped. I was an 80-year-old man. Okay, then we're getting into the nuances, and maybe that defense, you know, gets created. But
well, if you came at me with your martial art expertise and you're half my age, I mean, I would shoot you. I mean, you know, you scare me.
That's
in the knee, though. In the knee. I want to make sure that we're clear. In the knee, because I know you can recover from that. But anyway.
Hey guys, we've got quite a few questions coming in. So
okay, before we get to the questions, because I want to give plenty of time for the questions, I want to ask you one more question though. And this is the thing with the COVID-19. It's very important. I think everybody needs to hear this. The governor of Florida, DeSantis, had said that churches can be considered necessities. Okay. So you can open up your church doors tomorrow, basically, if you want to. I mean, seriously, that's kind of what he said. As long as you practice social distancing and the different things like this. My question to you, is it prudent for a church, a large church, to do something like that right now with still the threat of possibly having somebody getting the COVID-19 and dying from it? Would you really want to put your church in a position that if you did not practice everything to the T, and I don't know how you're going to do social distancing or all those things like that, but if somebody came to your church and died because they caught COVID-19 at your church, what would be the church's responsibility during that time frame?
Well, you know, and I'm gonna put my and this is I'll call it the devil's advocate hat. Okay?
And that's what I want you to do. That's what I want.
And I'll tell you, you can listen to the governor all you want and open your doors and have them come in, but the governor is not going to be the one to sue you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what ends up happening, and we could, you know, a lot of the attorneys right now, personal injury attorneys like myself, you know, we're seeing intakes are low because there's not a lot of accidents going on. There's not a lot of people at stores, so you don't have a lot of slip and falls, things like that. But a lot of us are sitting at our desks and our tables doing this right here, just waiting, because we know that when they start opening the doors and things and people are start getting back out, that those claims are going to ramp back up. And so people are going to be looking for reasons to file claims. And the easiest thing to do is say, look, this church was being negligent. They were not acting reasonably. They know that they have a congregation of X amount, and the risk of catching COVID from someone at this church is high. This is a hotspot area. And, you know, yes, I may have some fault for going to the church, but it doesn't absolve the church for exposing me to COVID-19. They exposed me to it. And, you know, that's a risk that you are going to have to take. And so I would say this: if you really want to assess that liability, call your insurance company, call your adjuster, and ask them can I open my doors? And if I do, and someone gets COVID-19, how are you going to handle that claim?
And that's really something you just said, because the guy in Tampa, the pastor in Tampa that was charged, he came out later and said, hey, I'm going to close down the church because I don't want people to be harassed by the tyrant government, when in actuality, his insurance company contacted him on the phone and canceled him. So if you want to look at the real truth behind that, he was shut down because of that, exactly what you just said. And I'm glad you brought it up. You should talk to your insurance company before you get ready to do that, because how are you going to handle it? So having said that, Wendy, what's your next question there?
So we have 13 questions in the queue. So,
all right, I got to go to bed soon. So,
all right. So I want to go back to Mike Scully. This came in at 7:16. Does a church who has a security team present with at least a level of training to meet minimum standard still also have to post, i.e., provide a measure of posted warning, like put up some kind of sign that they have safety team people?
no.
And
Go ahead.
and
Go ahead, James.
this may be more in your area, Jim, but what I would say is, obviously there are some required signs that you have to put, like if you have like circuit, closed circuit cameras, things like that. But certain posted warnings, I wouldn't recommend. But that's more of a training.
That would be my concern right there, because you're almost, the Department of Homeland Security just came out and said, that when churches start to go back, that they should make sure that they've dusted off their security plans and they're ready, because of the hate, not against churches. They have said there's no, there's not been any threat against a church, but there's a lot of people that are out here hurting, hating, and all these things like this. I think just like what James says, if you have cameras, of course, you should post that you have cameras. Where I would say no is because I think you put your safety team in a little bit of danger there. And plus, you can't say security in Florida. Other states might be different. I wouldn't do that. We work with churches. I hate to say it like this, but we do work with churches that have posted, we are all armed inside this church here. That doesn't give a good, I mean, if I'm walking to that church with my kids and I see that sign, I'm turning around and going right back out, because what do you mean you're all armed in here? I mean, is this a vigilante? We truly have to understand, and this is where we're going to get into the church safety training here soon, but we have to understand how we feel about it and the way that we try to tell you. We want to mitigate, is that the right word? Your liability. Is that the right word? Mitigate your liability. That's the word I was looking for, because I like it when you say it. We want to mitigate your liability. So what we're going to try to do is, if you see something that makes you feel uncomfortable, that you think that there's a possible threat, the first thing you need to be doing is getting on the phone and calling local law enforcement. You need to watch that person and then, take necessary action in case they start to do something that might threaten somebody or harm somebody in the church. But your first responsibility is to get on the phone and contact local law enforcement. Go ahead, Wendy. Next one.
I like this one. This one is good. And we've covered a little bit of it. Before an armed security team, and the person is anonymous, but that's okay. Before an armed security team can be established, should there be a written guide with policies and procedures, or is that not required?
There should be a written guide. There should be some sort of policies and procedures, and we're more than happy to help them out with that.
Let me just give an example. All right, just to kind of make it a little bit easier. I was representing a hotel franchise in a case involving a shooting of a 16-year-old. He was at a Sweet 16 birthday party. And so when the shooting occurred, obviously, after the criminal prosecution, everything was over. At that point, the parents of the decedent or the child that passed, they sued the hotel. They sued the parents who threw the party under their homeowner's insurance. They sued the guy who owned the hotel. They sued the police department, all these different entities, saying that there was not adequate security at this premises. And so as the defense attorney, the first thing I had to do was go to the premises, go to the hotel, and find out, okay, what did you have in place for security? And the guy opens his desk and there's a big mess of different manuals and papers and different things. And he's like, I'm sure there was a flyer or some sort of something that we had, you know, in here somewhere. Okay, well, that doesn't help. I said, well, what about your cameras? Do you have someone dedicated that's sitting and watching the cameras, you know, that you have all over the premises? No, they're just really there for show. Some of them don't even work. You know, different things that were highlighted that show that you have some things in place, but there is no protocols, no procedures, nothing in place to make sure, ensure that those devices, those cameras, those things that you have, you know, set up are even being used properly. And so you don't have those protocols in place. So then as the attorney, I can't say, look, my client did what they were supposed to do because they followed, you know, point by point by point by point. I couldn't show that they had anything really in place, and had to make other arguments to hopefully, you know, get them through that.
So the next thing we have, Dave Johnson made up a comment, and this is during the time, this was at 7:17 when Jim made the comment that there were a lot of people that, you know, have SWAT on their, you know, website. Dave's comment was there are too many companies out there that promote that type of training. And so he wanted to make sure that we reiterated that. The next question that we have, does the church have a duty to provide legal protection for each armed team member, or does each member have to purchase their own USS law or other legal insurance?
I will tell you this, if they're, you know, we'll bring, you can bring up semantics as this is a volunteer and say that this person, you know, has no real tie to the church, but when something happens, but I'll tell you, if they're volunteering for the church, it's almost as if you can consider them as an employee. And so without even having to put them on your insurance policy, they're already on your insurance policy. As soon as you allowed them to be on the property and take on a certain role for the church, that relationship established. And so one thing certain churches are doing now, Jim and I were talking about how insurance companies have changed and they've created a type of coverage called active shooter coverage recently, right? And so to have active shooter insurance in place, there are a number of things that they want, you know, that they require you to have, not only for the limits of coverage that they provide you, the excess limits on top of your general insurance policy, but they give you all these other heightened standards that you have to meet, and having an assessment and a security plan is one of those. But the other thing that they also discuss is if you want to add someone as an additional insured to your policy. And I would say, whenever you have someone on your safety team, number one thing to do would be call your insurance company and clarify whether they need to be added, or that individual needs to be added under your declarations page, or get a certificate of insurance. You know, obviously the person themselves, that's something that would be a decision they need to make, whether they should get some additional insurance for themselves, but that would be more of like a homeowner's type.
I want to jump in here for a second on this also, because I think it's an interesting question, but let me just say it this way. Do you require insurance on every volunteer of your church? Because if most of your volunteers are working in your children's ministry. I'm more worried about you having somebody sexually assaulting one of your children inside your children's ministry than I am having a guy discharge his firearm. I'll tell you that right now, because I open up Google Alert every single day and see where children are molested by volunteers inside the church. So it would be the same question to that. I mean, we're basically right now at this point in time talking about nothing but active shooters. That's not all that goes on inside these churches. It's just like we said, domestic violence issues, or a lost child, or a slip and fall, all these different things like that. if you put anybody as a volunteer, no matter what their position is, a greeter that gets upset because sees an ex-wife walking with a boyfriend and hits the guy, you have to watch out for these things. So, when you ask these questions, this would be my professional and personal response to your question. The church is going to be the church is going to be listed in a suit because they have the deeper pockets. They're still going to try to hurt you. So I would have that type of insurance. Like, I don't remember what you said, but we have USCCA. But I would have something. If I'm going to carry a weapon right now, because of the way the world is, I would have some sort of representation in case something went wrong. Go ahead, Wendy.
So the next one, when you guys were talking about qualifications for armed people, Dave Johnson made a comment. Our insurance company requires that we have them pass a qualification course prior to carrying and requalifying annually. So that was just a comment. And then we'll go on to the next one. And this is somebody in Ohio. It's Mel Cruzado. In Ohio, churches must grant a CCW holder permission to carry inside the church. If that permission is granted and you are not part of any safety team, would the church still face liability?
I don't know. I mean,
I would say, obviously, if the church is granting permission to, and it's something that's public, so obviously I can't speak for out of state, right? I'm a Florida attorney, and that's where I'm licensed. But I'll tell you, just generally, if you are allowing folks to come onto your premises with a firearm, and it's public knowledge, and you are giving that approval, then you're creating a risk. You're creating a risk that somebody may discharge a firearm in your premises, and you allowed it. You're putting it out there. So I would say, yeah, there would be some liability on that individual, because that's what attorneys do. They twist facts to create a claim. And so I would be very, very cautious about making that a public, kind of like broadcasting that, sort of like you were saying, Jim, with the church who puts the sign on the door that we all carry. Not only is that scary for somebody who's walking in with their kids, that's like you're putting a feast in front of a lawyer when you say that, because now it's the wild. I can paint this church as the Wild West. Anything goes, and they should have known that this was going to happen.
Right.
And now they need to pay all the money they got.
Right. Well, and Fellowship, Pennsylvania, I think it is Fellowship Christian Church in Pennsylvania. I might be wrong on this. They have a guy that shot and killed a person inside the church, and he was not with the safety team. He wasn't even involved with the safety team. He just kind of walked up and started taking it on himself. And later on, he had made the comment that he had done this before and it had worked, or nobody had said anything to him about it. If you happen to catch somebody in your church that does something like that, somebody needs to pull them aside and say, don't ever do this again. You need to put them on notice right then and there. Document it. Make sure that you write it down somewhere, date and time that this happened, because you don't want this person to do this on your property and you knew about it and didn't do anything about it. So you do have a little bit of responsibility. Look, churches don't want to know who's armed on their property. I'll tell you that right now. Now, in the safety team world, that's a different subject. But I work with a lot of churches that we've had meeting after meeting after meeting. What should we do about people that are armed inside our church? Tell them not to pull their gun unless the shooter's standing right above them. Once again, we're focusing on one thing that is a very, very, very small percentage of what happens inside your churches. It is important because it could happen, but there's prevention that should be placed in front of it to where you get way ahead of it before it gets out of hand, like the one in Texas. So go ahead.
And let me clear up one thing too. You know, right now we're talking about an active shooter or a catastrophic situation that happens at, you know, your church, right?
Mhm.
And so in those situations, like the Pulse shooting, some of these other, you know, where there's, you know, Las Vegas, where there's a number of people that are murdered or you know, hurt, injured, killed, those kinds of things. In those situations, you really have two ways that lawyers and how liability split up, how recoveries are made. There's two scenarios there. The first scenario is the either way. Well, first and foremost, either way, someone is going to get paid, right? The insurance company is there to assess risk and make claims go away. All right. So first and foremost, if a claim is made against your church, um, you have to be realistic and know that there is going to be a, you know, person on the other side that's going to say, okay, let me assess what your negligence really was. And in Florida, we have what's called comparative fault. Comparative fault means that that when you have 100% fault as a pie in a pie chart, it can be broken down by percentages between the parties. You know, even the person bringing the claim can have a percentage of fault in Florida, and so it minimizes what someone has to pay out when the defendant doesn't have as much fault if they're not 100% versus if they were only 20% at fault. And so when we're talking about assessing and assisting with your church liability, we're talking about taking it from the 100% fault where you would be if you had nothing in place, no procedures, no protocols, no manuals, nothing, to bringing it down to where it is something where you're resolving the claim within your policy limits or lower in a more manageable way so that your rates don't increase, you keep your insurance, you keep your business, you don't lose your assets.
And I want to jump on something that you just said right there, because I think this is a good example of what you're talking about. I have a friend of mine up north, and he at his church did training. One of the guys didn't even really listen, kept getting up and leaving, all these things like this, but made a kind of a racial profiling on a person because of the way he was dressed and things like that. It got out of hand. The next thing you know, he got sued. So he's their consultant, and he went to the church and said, "How much will you pay to make this go away?" He said, "You're going to lose. You're going to lose." He said, "The only saving grace you have is that the guy saw a black male walking in with a backpack that had dreadlocks. The only saving grace is the guy that made the mistake from the church was black also. So it wasn't a white on black issue. It was just a black on black issue. So that's the only saving grace you have in this. So how much do you want to pay? Because if you go to court, you're going to lose, and you're going to lose big time. And that goes, James, to what you're talking about, that 100% of the pie. Or would you pay a quarter of that pie just to have this guy say, I'm not going to come against you in court? Would you do that? And the church agreed to do that. And the guy did that. I mean, he said, okay, fine, I'm happy. But we're talking like $20,000 that they paid out to this guy. It wasn't like 5 or 10, it was 20,000. So is that something you really want to be saddled with? This is where you really need the training coming in. This is where you really need to be focused on this. And plus, we have to remember that who we are Christians. We are all one. We're all together. Yes, the wolf is coming in, but we have to make sure that we continuously, and this is the other reason why I do not like these churches that have, military tactics and things like that in churches. That's not what we're there for. That is not what we're there for. So that just gets me started. Go ahead, Wendy, another one. I'll get it on my
So
soapbox
before I go into the next one, I want to just remind people, because we have a ton of people that are asking questions in the chat as well. And I'm going to try to get to those after we're done, but we need you to go to the question and answers. I know somebody got frustrated because we weren't responding in there, but we made it clear. Question and answer, please. So the next thing, when we were talking about third-party vetting, does the CCW count as third-party vetting? I had Daniel and Matt both ask that.
Does the CCW
count as third-party vetting when you guys were talking about third-party vetting?
Okay. I teach concealed weapon classes here in the state of Florida. It's a joke. I mean, it is truly a joke. You come in, you take a class, I take you to a range. If you can hit the target, by law, I'm supposed to say you took the class and you showed me that you could load a gun, unload it, and everything is fine. It's a joke. That doesn't mean anything to me at all. When guys come to me and say, hey, I just got my CCW, I say, okay, well, we've got to go shooting, because I want to be the guy. Look, it probably will fall back on me. I mean, I can already tell you this. I'm the consultant, I'm the leader, so it probably will fall back on me. Do you think I want a guy? Like I said, one of my guys came to me and said, I can't hit the broadside of a barn. And he has a CCW. And I said, then don't carry it inside the church. So if I were to see him carry it, I would tell him to take it outside and put it away. And maybe even have a long conversation about him even being on the team anymore. No, it depends on what state you're from too. Let me clarify that, because I do know that other states require a lot more than the state of Florida. Do you know why and this was in 2017, we had 1.5 million concealed weapon permits, is because they come to Florida. All the snowbirds come down here to Florida, have residency here, know that they can take an 8-hour, not even an 8-hour course, a 4-hour. If they go to the fairgrounds, it's a 90-minute course, pull the trigger in a barrel, and then they get a piece of paper that says, hey, you can get your concealed weapons permit. In other states, I know they do require more. I would have to look at the state's qualifications before I would say, yes, that would qualify you. Because I'm telling you, I'm also a firearms instructor at the academy. I teach out there. I'm the lead for what we call equivalency training, which is police officers coming from other states that are shooting here. Some of these guys can't shoot. So there's a little more to it than just pulling the trigger on a gun. There's a whole lot more. So like I said, this is what I tell people: get your team together and go out and go to one of these shooting clubs that have competition shooting. That gives you an opportunity to really, truly get into, the mechanics of it, loading, moving, shooting. Get out there and do those things. It's a lot of fun. It teaches you exactly how well you are. And then this safety team leader can kind of watch these guys. And if you got a guy that's at 0 after it's all over with, I think I'd have a long conversation with him. But just make it fun. It's a ministry. Get out here and have some fun. Next question.
Okay. Is the duty or hurdle, this is from Casey Sheffield, is that duty or hurdle overcome if those carrying within the congregation on the safety team are police officers?
I would, I'll tell you this. So, and this is kind of piggybacking off of what Jim just got finished talking about. I wanted to kind of highlight something. The CCW may be good as an element of proof that this person is qualified or met a certain standard to carry a gun based off of the training that we had. First element, CCW. Second element, he did such and such hours at the range. Third element, we had him go through the virtual training course that Trinity Security Allies has, or whatever. And so, not to say that the CCW is not important, but what it would be is it would be probably one thing that separates somebody from being a firearm carrying part of the safety team versus somebody who's not, right? Same thing with the question about former law enforcement or current law enforcement, okay? At the end of the day, you still need to have certain practices and procedures and protocols put in place. So if you have someone, a third-party security consultant, come in and assess everyone, those individuals will need to have to go under the same assessment as someone else who's volunteering who has no law enforcement background, because that's the only way you can say to an insurance company and an attorney or whoever when something happens that, look, we follow the same practice. Doesn't matter who you are. This is what was implemented at our church. This is what we invested in to make sure our church had adequate security. These are the guidelines they told us to make sure everyone follows. And when it comes to the couple folks or whoever is assigned to be able to carry a firearm on premises, here are the standards that they have to meet. Doesn't matter whether they have law enforcement background or not, because again, you want to be very careful in creating a higher standard. If you're out there promoting that everyone on my safety team is former law enforcement and they're, cream of the crop, and something happens and you have an accidental discharge, or you have someone who, yes, he may be a law enforcement officer, but maybe there's a reason why he doesn't do the beat anymore. There's a reason why he doesn't do traffic anymore, but you got him on your safety team and he's a little bit of a loose cannon. You're opening the door. So that's why I said the main thing, and that's what we keep hitting and harping about, is making sure you have some protocols, some practice, some procedures in place, some guidelines in place, and making sure that the folks that you have helping on your safety team are following those things, because that's really what you're going to be using to bring that liability down if something happens.
I'm going to throw something else in here too. You have a guy that, okay, in Pasco County, if you want to work a part-time job, it's first come, first serve. So you truly as a church do not know who you're going to get the day that you put this part-time job out here. It could be anybody. You don't know if you're getting a person that from the Pasco County, and I'm not picking on Pasco County, I'm just using any law enforcement. You don't know if you got a guy, just like what James was saying, that is one step away of being terminated because of his excessive force, and loses his temper in something that he should not lose his temper in the church. And you did not do your due diligence and find this out. You might have some trouble here. It's just like hiring somebody that has been charged with child molestation, but yet you didn't do a criminal history check to check them out. Are you doing criminal history checks on the law enforcement officers? Yes, we know that they're not arrested because they're still working. But if they have a bad, if they have a bad jacket, I mean, we call them jacket record of where they've had multiple being disrespectful to people, maybe some, excessive forces or things like that. And then you bring them on. Have you even checked their firearms qualifications? Just like what James was saying here. When guys come in guys or ladies that come in, cadets that want to be policemen from other jurisdictions, I will ask them who's been at a small agency. When they raise their hands, I say, how many times did you qualify a year? They will tell me one time a year. How many times did you go shooting other than that? Most of them will not raise their hand because they didn't go shooting in between that time. So just because they have a uniform on doesn't mean anything to me at all. Not one bit. I would have to see their qualifications before, I would put a lot of faith in that. And nothing against my law enforcement brothers and sisters, because I love you dearly. All right, next one.
So this is from Troy Long. In general, would having a concealed carry permit through the state satisfy that requirement, or would you say it's imperative to have training beyond that? If so, does it matter if the church pays for it or if it's pay for it themselves? Looking from a liability standpoint.
I'm going to jump in here real quick and say this. If you start putting all these issues on your churches, they're going to tell you not to carry a weapon. That's just all there is to it. They're not going to pick up the price. This is where I think let me use this analogy because this is the one I really like to use. When people were going across the country, wagon trains going across the country, when they were not gunfighters, they were farmers, they were cattlemen, they were just regular people, okay? Average people, worked the land, worked the farms, all these different things like this. If the Indians attacked, they surrounded the wagons together, pulled everybody inside, fought off the Indians, but they did not go after them. This is one of these things about these clearing rooms that bothers me. But they were also hoping that the cavalry would show up to help them out. This is what the church needs to be thinking about. The church needs to be thinking about protecting those inside the church. Because if I lock all my doors down, or I keep it to where the person cannot get into where we are, where we talk about alert, barricade, and then confront, the actual shooting portion of this could be the very last thing. there has to be a lot of training in this. And I think this is where we have to mitigate our liabilities, because we have to be trained what to look for, how to prevent it before it happens, instead of focusing on having 30 guys in there that can shoot the, a gnat off of a cigarette. Those are things that concern me when we talk about these things. Yes. Do I feel like we should have people inside the church armed? I'm a strong proponent for that. But I think there needs to be cool heads, people who know how to get out of trouble first, than to pull a weapon. And that, to me, is where the proper training comes from.
And I'll say, they very well may be the law enforcement / former law enforcement individual. You got, obviously that would tend to be more someone that you would want to be the person who would carry the firearm. But like Jim said, there's still a vetting process that everybody has to go through so that you kind of meet those elements. Again, a CCW would be helpful. I mean, obviously you're licensed to a certain degree. But again, that's just one little check mark. And I would say, that's why it's so important to have someone assess your safety team, because then you can show that, when a claim happens, it's not just your eyes looking at it. You have an insurance adjuster's eyes that are looking at it. Their supervisors are looking at it because they're trying to determine whether they need to pay the limits or pay the amount. Then you have two sets of attorneys that are looking at it, one that's pursuing the claim and potentially one that's defending it. And so when you have all these different parties, all these different eyes analyzing what's going on in your church, and you don't have something to show that you followed some sort of protocol, that's what really is important. That's why I keep hammering that as being the main thing. You have to have somebody assess that safety team. Just having them and having a presence there, yes, it will help with morale and make folks at your church maybe feel better about their congregation. But when you talk about legal liability, it may not have a hill of beans to do with much in defending your church, because you don't have the most important parts of it, implemented.
Next, babe.
So this question is from Paul Vance. He asked it at 7:33. He said, "Can the church be liable if a member of the security team did not follow the church's policies and procedures?"
And so, that, and I kind of was talking about that. The good thing about having a protocol and a set of procedures and things of that in place, the good thing about it is when you have someone that you didn't, expect or didn't know was a loose cannon, or someone that, lost it all of a sudden, or somebody who went outside of what their role was supposed to be, then they're not acting on behalf of the church anymore. And now you have something to show and prove that they weren't doing. They weren't acting on behalf of the church with their actions. Okay. And so when you have those protocols in place where you're doing background checks, you're training folks how to use, firearms, you're showing them how to fill out incident reports, you're showing them step by step, how do you report a criminal act or whatever, or how do you, take statements from folks so that what happened. So when the police come to ask questions, you can provide them, who, what, when, where. All those kinds of things are very important. And so, again, that information, that documentation, that's the reason why we keep talking about the documentation. That's helpful to defend you in a number of ways. So if a person, there was a case we were talking about, Jim, a few weeks ago, where a member of the safety team approached someone in a parking lot.
Yeah, that's the Muslim temple in Tampa.
Okay. And in that scenario, it got escalated. The safety team person saw the person as a threat and, discharged his firearm and killed him. And now person's estate or his wife or whoever the next of kin is suing the church, is suing the place of worship, the mosque. And so Basically, if I were defending that case, I would be looking at what about this specific safety team member shows that he was not acting on behalf of the church.
Right.
And that's where you're hoping that the church or the mosque has some written protocols that say, okay, this individual is either one of the people that can or can't, carry the gun. These are the areas that he's permitted to, provide his volunteer services. This is the scope. When it gets beyond a certain point, this is what he's supposed to do before he escalates or before he draws his weapon. Did he act outside of what he was trained to do? Because then you can shift the focus onto the actual actor and not the place that it happened at.
I just remembered something, and Wendy's going to kill me in a minute. But anyway, I wanted to throw something else out here real quick. When an incident happens in a police department, one of the first things that they do is go after the person's training records. And they go after the police department also because they want to include the police department in there. And what they do is the police department tries to say, well, wait a minute, we trained him to do this and he did this, to try to kind of like wipe their hands of it. The church is going to try to do the same thing if you have proper training. If you don't have any training, you're just kind of like out there in the wind. So next one, babe.
So Jeff Page from Trinity by the Cove in Naples.
Hey, Jeff.
I'm thinking that with our older members here, perhaps it would be better to not establish a safety team in terms of liability and continue with a uniformed armed security guard with individuals carrying if they choose to.
Listen, it doesn't hurt to have that. It does not hurt to have that. I still think that you need to have somebody in there, even if they're not carrying, to know what's going on inside your church, to be like a liaison, at least multiple people there. Just to say that this security guard is going to run it for you, I'm concerned about it. Jeff, I really would think that you could be that person that would be able to really, they're not going to know your church like you are. And I think that's very important. So, and of course I go back to where Christ said he's the good shepherd and he knows his sheep and they come to his name. People know you, would trust you. And I would think that you would be a very intricate part in that. Even though you may hire somebody, you still need to be running the show in a sense.
And I'll put it in another fashion. In this broadcast, we're just talking about active shooter or when a criminal act happens on the premises. And that's why we're focusing on safety team and whether they're armed and things of that nature. Safety teams don't just encompass that one aspect. And so when I was asked to do some consults and we went to a couple months ago, Jim, the very first thing I did was I walked the property.
Right.
And there were a couple of things that I did to assess the property to see, okay, it's not just the fact that there may be some cameras that I don't see where they should be, or, it looks like there's some access points that they should be worried about. No, what I was looking at was whether there was adequate or sufficient warning paint on some of the sidewalks, whether there were potholes and damages in the ramps leading to, that wheelchair access had. I was looking in the parking lot, which was, they had a big gravel portion of the parking lot where there were huge potholes and things that if somebody fell down it, they would seriously hurt themselves. There were what we call attractive nuisances. That's something that would attract a child to mess with and get hurt. There was a unprotected, rusty staircase that had no blocking on it. And it was right by where the youth center was. So you would imagine, those little kids could run up there, fall down, all those kinds of things. And so when we're looking at safety in that sense, for the folks who have older members, that would be the reason why you would want a safety team. You would want someone to be able to assess, okay, if Sister Jones takes a fall, what do we do in response? Do we call 911? Do we call her an ambulance? Do we do nothing? Do we take down statements? What do we do? And so most churches don't have that information. And then they're going to get some big firm or some attorney to come involved, and they're going to say, look, because of the disrepair that was at this premises, because the fact that you guys let some juice or something lay on the floor for 40 minutes and didn't clean it up and didn't have someone going by making sure things were picked up. This is why she fell. And now you're on the hook for her hip replacement. And so again, that's, it's not just about whether somebody has a gun and is going to shoot the place. When you talk about safety and premises liability, we're looking at the entire spectrum, because like you said, even in the context of having a youth pastor or youth minister who, may be having some inappropriate contact with some of the students. Well, if you have a safety team member that has the ability to supervise or walk by or see things happening, then now you have a reporting mechanism. Now you have things in place where you can say, look, we weren't just having a blind eye to things happening and we just let anyone who volunteered just want to volunteer. No, this person was also vetted by the safety.
And just to add to what James is talking about, you're the one that's going to know there's something wrong with the pastor or the volunteer in the children's safety. Do you really want that person from the outside handling your stuff on the inside? No, you're going to want to handle it within the church too. And so you do need people there. That you may not be doing the physical part of escorting a person out if needed, but you should have somebody there that's looking for other issues like James is talking about. Next one. And we're going to have to cut it off here in a couple of minutes because we've gone over an hour, but we will answer all the questions that have not been answered. I'll get up with James and send them over and get some response from him. And so we won't leave anybody out, but like I said, we went over an hour. We were just going to do this for an hour. So let's do 2 more questions. Pick the 2 that you like, babe. And then we're going to call it a night.
So one of the questions, and it's actually over in the chat, but it's something that has not been brought up. Why do you mentioned the term security cannot be used in Florida? To what extent? What about team member what about wearing like team member clothing, like security across their shirt? No.
The state of Florida is kind of unusual not unusual. They had this thing. In order for you to call yourself security, you have to be certified by the state. Okay. And you have to be hired by an outside company. I would tell you right off the bat. And plus that puts you at a different level. Now you have an organized, you're really putting it out there. And that puts you at a different liability. If I end up in church and somebody looks at me and goes, Jim, you're a part of the security team, I'm going to look at them and go, no, I'm a part of the safety team. Here's the reason why we say this. 2 reasons. 1, Florida really doesn't want you to do it. Number 2, if I walk into your church and see big guys with security written all over I'm going to turn around and go out. I don't want to be in that church. Why would I want to be in that church? That's telling me that there's problems all around. That's telling me that in that 5-mile radius that James is talking about, there's gang warfare. That's the only reason you would have them there. We call it safety because everybody loves the word safe. Everybody loves it. We use it everywhere. We want to teach our kids how to be safe. We're going to buy the car that has the 5-star safety rating. Everybody likes that word safe. If we go to a little lady inside the church and she says, what do you do here at the church? And you say, I'm part of the safety team. She feels like that you're the one that's going to help her across the street, or you're the one that's going to hold the umbrella for her when it's pouring down rain. If you say security, you're going to scare her. So listen, we can call ourselves watchmen on the tower, watchwomen on the tower. We can call ourselves sheepdog. I don't really care. I would also tell you that I would not wear anything that said that I was a part of a safety team or a security team, because I think that puts you at an unnecessary risk. If somebody comes in and is going to start shooting, they're going to be looking for you first. So if you're the first guy that they shoot when they go through the door, where do I have anybody as my safety team? What you're done. If I go in and take out everybody that's wearing one of those really nice shirts that has security on it, what's happened here? I've lost everybody. We're supposed to be ambassadors for Christ. We're supposed to be expanding the kingdom of God. This is our major focus. Our second focus is the gift that he's given us to be the safety of the church, to watch out for those things that could cause our church harm. And that goes down the whole list. We have OSHA that protects businesses. We don't have anything that protects churches. Now, the liability issues that James is talking about, where they don't paint a step to where people can see it. Yeah, those are things that can catch you too, but there's a whole lot more behind it. But the number one thing that we should be doing is understanding that we work for him. We work for him, and that we need to be ministers of his, and we need to be the light that people are looking at. And we need to be one that people can not only come to us because they have a concern or an issue or a problem, but somebody that can come to us when they have a personal problem that we maybe can help them out. So I think that we have to be really careful about what our role is in this. We are there. We have been picked. We've been chosen by God himself. If you don't feel that, if you just want to do this because you think it's cool to be a security or safety team person, you're in the wrong. God didn't put you there. He's looking for the meek. Do not mistake my meekness as being a weakness, though. That is not what it's there for. You will find that I'm the biggest duck in the pond when it comes to those things like that. But I also know that my God is my Lord and Savior and has a role for me to do, and that is to be an ambassador for Christ. So get rid of the security shirts, please. That's not who you are. You're the shepherd in there. You're the sheepdog. You're watching for it, but you don't want to put that out there. If I'm a person that has a problem and I happen to make eye contact, or God tells them to come and talk to you, they're probably going to come and talk to you more quicker if you don't have that security shirt on. But you're a leader in the church because of what your position is. So you should be reaching out to those and helping those that are also fallen. So let's just make sure that we just keep that in mind. I really would appreciate that. And I'm sorry, I got off on a soapbox. But
I know, and we have 7 questions, so I'm going to combine 2. One is from Mike Holson, one is from Chuck Rogers, because I think should all volunteers be background checked? That's everybody. And then second part of that would be from Chuck Rogers. Do you let your congregation know that you have a safety team present? Just keep the don't say security, but just, so what are your all background checks, and should the church know about the safety team?
I'm going to jump on the background checks real quick. And James, if you have something to add in here, go ahead. The only problem that you run into with background checks, and I don't have a problem with that, but if a person has a bad past that is really wanting to get away from this and wants to be the greeter at the door, which is probably one of the safest places you can be because you're out there in the public, or they want to work in the parking lot, to direct traffic. I really, if they're trying to get rid of their past, you may scare them away from wanting to serve inside the church. We've had this happen before. And then let me ask you this question. Let's say that you get that background check back and this person has a drug arrest or a domestic violence assault or something like that. Are you going to stop them from serving in your church when they've come to the church and told the pastor that they have a bad past and they want to forget about that past and they've asked God for forgiveness and they know that he's given them that forgiveness? How are you going to proceed with that? I think you have a slippery slope there if you make everybody have a record check. Everybody. Now, if you require the volunteers to have a record check, you also, you should already have anybody that's hired, period, whether it be the secretary or, the person who puts together your coffee at your coffee shop. I mean, I just have mixed emotions about that because of what we're in. We're in the business of trying to reconstruct people who are trying to come back and start their life all over again. If they're in a sensitive position, yes, make sure. Children's ministry, very sensitive. Safety team, yes. If they're dealing with money, yes. But like I said, your ushers and your greeters, I would be careful in that because we have had people that were told that we were going to have to do a record check on them that then said, I'm not going to serve because I don't want you to know about my past. So that's my point of view. What was the second part of that?
The second part was, do you let your church know about the safety team?
Yes. Yes, we do, because they're our first line of defense. If they don't know about us being there, who are they going to go to and talk to? I tell police officers when they get out on the street, the first person you want to meet is the nosiest person in the neighborhood because they're going to come to you and tell you what's going on. When I had my house broken into, I went to the nosiest person in the street and she told me exactly who it was 3 days after it happened. When I chased a bank robber one time, the nosiest person on the street knew who the bank robber was. So yeah, you tell everybody. We need them. We need them. They're part.
Okay. What about posting no firearms permitted from Larry Blinn?
That's fine if you are going to require it. Are you going to search people? I mean, if you say no firearms are allowed, that means no firearms allowed. But you know what else you're putting out there? You're telling the bad guy that people in here aren't armed. So, you know, I don't know if that's a good idea either.
Okay. And then, are you still there?
Yes.
Okay.
We're waiting on you.
Kevin McCon. I lead our unarmed safety team. I'm also a paid staff member and carry concealed. Pastoral staff has asked me to and are aware that I carry. What documentation needs to be in my employee file? Before the shutdown, I started shooting in local matches to hone my skills. What is the best way to document my range time? Anything else I need to consider?
Take your targets home, put date and time when you went shooting. You know, if they have paperwork that places you in your where you rate, just anything that shows, get a picture of some, you know, you shooting out there. Just so date time really more than anything else, where you went shooting, what type of course it was. That's the best thing on that.
And I would also say, just aside from logging your time and stuff like that, what I would also do is make sure that the church provides some sort of scope or, you know, memoranda as to what you are allowed to and not to do on church grounds. That way you can also protect yourself, because you can say I was acting within my parameters if you are having to step up. Aside, and that way the church also is comfortable with what they're allowing you to do, and there's something on paper about it. Because typically what happens when there's nothing written out as to what your responsibilities are, it becomes a he said, she said, and it's never good for the defense side. It's always good for the person bringing the claim.
Good point. Very good point.
So we've only got a couple more questions. Those that want to hang with us, you guys can hang. There's only 4 left if you guys want to knock them out.
All right, let's go.
Okay.
Lightning round.
Mike Holz, to my knowledge, carrying a firearm at church with the school, paid daycare, or using a school campus in Florida, except by law enforcement and licensed security, regardless of being in session, is currently still illegal. Should a church post a no firearm sign, or should they prohibit the safety team member from carrying to mitigate liability?
I'm going to jump on one part of this, and you might want to add something to it, James. Okay, here's my question. Monday through Friday, is that when the school is there, and on Friday afternoon they shut the doors and it becomes a church? Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, that is a church. If I were to come in and make a report as a law enforcement officer, and I know somebody's going to push this, and I know that I'm probably going to get pushback from it, but every time I go to a different county, I ask the deputy who shows up at our training the same exact question. If you were to come to this church on a Sunday and there was a shooting, what would you list the premise as? You would list the premise as a church. Okay. Now, if you are meeting in a school, that's a different subject. I would be concerned about that. But the Florida code is that gray area. And of course, you'd have to have a good attorney like James to protect you, because it really does kind of go in and talk about as long as it is operating as a school. Sunday day is not operating as a school, but I don't want to get into that gray area. If your church, our church has a daycare, as a school, and we're about to open up another school that's going to be going on during the week. But when you look at the premise, when you look at the property appraisal, it's going to say on their church. So after Friday, it's not a school anymore. It goes back to the church. So that's that. I would love to work with James on a case like that. I think we'd win. I think we would. But the law enforcement officers, the deputies, and everybody I've ever talked to about this have always said that they would put in the premise that it is a church. So I would go with that. Like I said, if you're meeting in a school, that's a little bit different. It's a little bit different.
Ready for next one?
Sure.
Okay, Wayne Duclos, how does one go about vetting a law enforcement officer? Most employers are reluctant to provide any information other than dates of employment.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Freedom of Information Act. I can ask for an officer's jacket, his personnel record. I can take a look at it. Am I correct? It's public record, right?
I thought so.
I mean, they used to do it at Bel Air all the time. People would come in and look at it, whether or not they had something. Attorneys look at it all the time when they're about to handle a case. That's one of the things that they look at. Has this guy ever been charged with lying, in the department? Because trust me, they want to know that, especially a high profile case. Vetting an officer, how I would do it? I'd have coffee with him. I'd pull him aside and start talking to him.
And
I'd witness to him. Go ahead. And
I'll tell you this, and this is just back to what we were talking about earlier. Again, if it's an officer or just a person, just someone else who is has a calling to do volunteer for the safety team, you have to put them through the same vetting process. And so if your protocols, your procedures that have been put in place, and that's why I say, make sure you have some party, come in and do an assessment of your particular premises, because folks like Jim will tell you there security manuals for specific premises. There are manuals for churches, there are manuals for banks, and the security standards are different for each one of them. Mm-hmm. And so you have to have someone who is in the type of premise will be able to explain, look, this is what you need to make sure that you're meeting the standard of having adequate security. And these individuals who are taking on this responsibility, although they are volunteers, they need to meet these certain requirements. So it doesn't matter if they put on a police uniform during the day, and then on Sundays are doing safety team. They still need to go through the same vetting process that's put in place.
One of the things that we do is we interview the person. We have a set of questions that we're going to ask. And trust me, one of the reasons why they like me at our church is because when the security officers come in, we had a deputy that was coming in tattered and worn and looked like he'd been out all night long partying. We requested that he didn't come back. I mean, it was just a sad thing. I mean, he wasn't professional. 90% of all the guys out here in Pasco County are very professional. 90% of them that show up at your church are going to come in and talk to you. That's the way you start to vet these guys. You start to find out who they are. If they come in and start dropping the F-bomb or GD or things like that, you need to have a serious discussion with them, because you need them to act the same way that you expect everybody to act inside that church. They're no different from anybody else when they come in. So I like the way James talked about it. They need to be at the same standards. It's easy to see if they have those standards or not. Have a cup of coffee. You'll find out real quick whether you'd want to be around them or not. It's just really easy. Okay, next one, dear.
All right, from Chuck Rogers, 813. Would you consider a certificate on file with the church proper documentation for the sake of liability?
On what?
He didn't say. Chuck, if you're out there, let me know.
I mean, if you're talking firearms, what are you going to take an NRA class? Is that what you're going to put up as a standard? You know, here's an NRA class that you have to go through that sets, you know, it's an actual shooting class that gives you a little piece of paper at the end and says that you've done that. This needs to be done every year because that would be the requirement that would be made. And I'm sitting here thinking of things I've got to start doing. And this is what we put people through. Or if you're talking about training, I would make sure that they listen. We have it that they have to show up at least twice a year for training. So, you know, those are things that are requirements. So
I went ahead and emailed him and asked, or messaged him and asked to go ahead and please email us over the question. And the last question we have is from Kevin McCon. How do people know who is on the safety team so that they can seek us out when we don't identify themselves?
you have training that includes everybody inside your all your volunteers, all your staff. You have something that celebrates those people so that they know. You have your pastor pointed out. I mean, everybody in the church, every volunteer, every staff member in our church knows who we are. There's just no doubt in anybody's mind. They all know who we are. You know, they've been around. Look, your people that visit might not know who you are. That's fine. I'm not really, you know, they don't have to know right at the first. All your members will know who you are because you should be shaking hands, talking to them, really kind of letting them know who you are, what you do. They'll see the radio in your ear. Go ahead.
And, you know, some places, I mean, obviously most churches, they have announcements, and, you know, you can always do an announcement to congratulate, you know, thank them for something, or, you know, announce that they're having a meeting or whatever. Some churches have the directories. I remember, you know, growing up where our church, we would have picture day for certain departments, you know, certain roles you played. And so you got to take your picture and you were put in the church directory for it. So again, there's no need to have shirts with security and all that kind of stuff on it. There is a way that you can familiarize your safety team with the congregation to make sure that they feel comfortable with them and can identify them without also posing, you know, information that can be, you know, put you at risk. So that's the way I would recommend handling that.
And let me just ask you a question real quick, James, on this. Because if I put a shirt on somebody that says that they're security and a person walks in and does harm them, I'm really kind of liable for that, aren't I? Because I didn't put a shirt. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, you know, like I said, if you have somebody volunteering for you, you're already taking on a responsibility for that person. And, you know, again, that print on your shirt is creating a standard of care. It's creating a higher standard. And it's invoking, or it's telling everybody out to the public that this is not just a normal person. This is security. This is somebody who's trained and licensed in security, and, you know, has all the certifications, and he's, like you said, state certified. You know, which 9 times out of 10, most people who wear those security shirts outside of bars and clubs and things of those natures, they don't fall in that category either. They're just somebody that they found off of Craigslist, or, you know, some company that's got, you know, some guys that are, you know, kind of burly that, you know, they strap a shirt on, but there is no training there. And so when, you know, again, lawyers make a living in picking those types of things apart, because the very first thing that a lawyer will do is investigate the security company behind that shirt. And when it becomes clear that this was just a shirt and it was just for show, then you open a whole nother, you know, can of worms. So again, you know, you got to be very careful with that kind of stuff.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and close it down. James, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming out here. Let's get together and talk about this, because I want to do it again. I want to do it again here real soon. We'll have a different set of topics that we'll cover. when we do it again. But listen, if you have any questions at all, Simmons Law Group, here, I'm going to put it up on the screen. And so that you can see his information, get in touch with him. He also does kind of something that we do. He will offer you he will offer you a consulting fee that is basically like the same thing that we offer. And for what he does, it's well worth it. It's worth every penny of it. First off, I don't like a lot of attorneys, but I do like him. So this is one of the things that I'll say right there. He is a good guy. So if you have any questions, you need to get in touch with him, mylegalchampions.com. You can contact me. My email and my telephone number by now. You should. And you can contact me, and I will make sure that James gets the information. But I truly appreciate y'all coming out tonight. We will be back out here next Thursday again. What will we be talking about, Wendy?
We're going to talk about building a safety plan.
Okay, we'll be talking about building a safety plan. So we will see you again next week. James, thanks again, and God bless, and y'all be safe out there.
Hey,
Thank you
before
so
you
much.
head out, I want to let you know we had almost 100 people show up between all the different Facebook pages.
Wow.
Beautiful.
That's awesome.
Praise God.
And a lot of them stayed with us.
Okay.
That's awesome.
All right. We'll talk later. Take care, James.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Hey, anytime.